right, welcome everybody to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace, and I think our guest today might add the words, and harmony. I'm really excited and very privileged and honored to be able to have a discussion today with Eileen McKusick. Eileen, thank you so much for being here. I think we have a lot to talk about. I'm just going to give you a quick intro based on what's in the back of one of her books. Eileen Day McKusick is a pioneering researcher in the fields of electric health and therapeutic sound. She's the creator of the sound therapy method Biofield Tuning, founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute and Tuners Without Borders, and author of the best-selling award-winning book, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and Electric Body, Electric Health, to which there's also an audio book, and I've listened to that. It's fabulous. I would recommend that to anyone. So plenty to talk about. Eileen, how's things going?
Things are great, Jefferson. I can't complain. How about with you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I tell you, I think Victor Wooten had a Spirit of Music camp a couple of years ago. It was during the pandemic, and he invited you to be one of the presenters. And initially, tuning forks, I wasn't sure exactly what the angle is. Victor has a lot of vision. And but then seeing you and hearing what you were talking about at that time, I was just really honestly blown away by all the things that you talk about, but all the things that you've done. And I've learned in the book, you have quite a trajectory in your career, but where you've been recently with doing all the research and the study, you're really, it's brilliant, innovative. It's sort of an explanation of who we are as humans even. And so I was so happy to be able to learn about you, get introduced to you from Victor's camp. And we did a conversation with some other folks on Planetary Gig Talk Live. And recently we were both at the Spirit of Music camp at Wooten Woods, and boy, oh boy, there's some things to talk about there too. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, without going into your whole history, which people can listen to the book or read the book for, about, how did music, sound healing, how did all these concepts really kind of come into your life, and what was a little bit of your path or trajectory for those who might not know, is how you got to be here?
Well, I was called, and I was reluctant. The story. But I was first called to music when I was 20, when I received very clear inner guidance that I needed to learn how to sing. And I was a hopelessly non-musical child. I was the kid in music class that was clapping on the offbeat and singing off key and squeaking my clarinet. I came from a non-musical family. I hadn't really been exposed to music. And I had a lot of trauma as a kid that made me sort of right, left dyslexic and just not very integrated in my body, not very coordinated. And so music was just this sort of tangled mess in my slightly dyslexic brain. And I did a lot of plays in high school. I was always in plays, but I was never in the musicals. And I was always in awe of people who were comfortable enough in their own skin and confident enough to sing in a musical, right? It was so like leagues away from the realm of possibility to me. But when I receive guidance, like, it comes in really strong and it's really persistent. And I think maybe you can relate to that, and listeners can too. And so finally I had to relent to this sort of endless, like, you have to do this. I was like, okay. So I signed up for my very first singing lesson when I was 20. And I'll never forget this experience, because the teacher was just hitting middle C on the piano, and she's just trying to get me to go la. And I had an experience where I felt like I had hands around my throat and my stomach started churning. I started sweating. My knees started knocking, and I couldn't even make a sound. Like it took me 15 minutes to finally like croak out a sound. And then I burst into tears. And this poor music teacher was just looking at me like, oh, she just so wasn't equipped to handle it. And I came out of that being like, wow, like what is wrong with me? Like, how did that happen? Like, where did my voice go? Right? It was like I didn't have any conscious context to understand why I had such a response to that vulnerability. And kind of long story short, over the next 7 years, I had 7 voice teachers in 7 years between the ages of 20 and 27. And the first 5 told me that I was tone deaf, that I couldn't hear, and that I couldn't sing, and that there was nothing they could do with me. And for whatever reason, I persisted. I didn't quit. And what happened was I discovered when I was around 25, I started going to massage therapy school. I started doing yoga, and I started to discover like just how much freeze and trauma and tension there was in my body. In Chinese medicine, a lot of people know that the liver opens to the eyes. Less people realize that the kidneys open to the ears, and the kidneys are where we hold this sort of stress and trauma, the kidney adrenal complex. And my kidneys were just in an uproar. In fact, they weren't only like traumatized, but they were actually, one body worker discovered that my kidneys were actually like tucked up because I was pinned down and tickled like every day when I was little. And so my kidneys had somehow like squeezed themselves out of reach. And so because I had all of this trauma and tension and interference, it was blocking my ability to hear clearly. And as I started to do yoga and body work, I got rolfed and I started to relax. That was when tuning forks first came into my life. And my very first set of tuning forks I got in 1996 from a catalog. I'd been reading books on the use of color and sound and music, like vibrational healing. It just made a lot of sense to me. And when I saw the set of tuning forks, I was like, oh, I need to get those. And they were the C major scale. And so what I did was I held the handle of the fork, the vibrating fork. I pressed my ear flap closed, like C, D, E, F, G, and I could match the vibration of it. So I would, and I taught myself the scale vibrationally from inside my head. And the combination of that made me really make a lot of progress with my 6th teacher. And when I got to my 7th teacher, she said, you can hear and sing fine. And I was like, amen and hallelujah. And at the time, I had a place called the Center, which was the top floor of an old mill building with the brick walls and the big windows and right on the river, just big open space. And we were hosting all kinds of classes there. We had a women's chorus and a drumming class, and I was really getting into this. And then I had a group of friends who were musicians. We started getting together a few nights a week, and I started doing making sound, like toning. I wasn't singing songs or doing spoken word. And we started to really get into a kind of groove. We didn't perform or anything, but we just kind of got together and played around and really started to pick up momentum with that. And it was really feeling like, wow, I'm really like on my path here. And then I got pregnant. And, I'm one of those people with huge amounts of energy, can just like work all the time. And that first pregnancy just like all I could do was lay on the couch. And so all of that whole world that I had created and that I was moving in just like absolutely dissolved. And I became a mom. And then the tuning forks kind of took over. And I spent 25 years, raising my kids and sort of growing this whole Biofield Tuning thing. And then a few years ago, that guidance came back in and it said, okay, now you have to take everything that you've learned about sound, about intention, about the body's electrical system, the biofield, and bring that back to music and embed all that you know about sound healing into music. And because you're going to reach a much bigger audience with music than you are with tuning forks. A lot of people hear tuning forks and are like, okay, and I'm the same sort of person, I was like, tuning forks, like, really? But then, what is a tuning fork? It's really just a tone generator. So
Mhm.
what we're really doing is just working with pure tones, right? You kind of have to get past the tuning fork and into like what it does and the power of generating a pure tone and working with that, which, the forks have taught me so much over the years. But this feeling like I needed to get back into music led me to these two Australian brothers, Isaac and Toril Corin, also known as the Brothers Corin. And they have a service called the Songwriter's Journey, where they take people like me who want to get over the fear of singing, in front of people, because that was a terror, even as I progressed and started playing with my little band, like the thought of being in front of anybody and actually singing a song was like, I still hadn't gotten over that. And I was like, okay, these guys will like take me over the hump. And so we started to play around. The deal was they were going to help me co-write and record a few songs. And so we started the process of starting to write songs, but then COVID happened. And the planned trajectory of me going back to California in May of 2020 to do the recording obviously couldn't happen. And so what we ended up doing, and I don't even really know how this started or how it happened, because we did not set out with the intention to do this. But we discovered that there is a whole set of sounds that resonate in very specific parts of the body. And we would sit around in Zoom meetings or in person when we got together, and we would play around with all of these sounds. And a lot of them are like very primitive. They're like baby sounds. There's like goo and ga and wah and ma and pa, fa. They're all baby sounds, but they resonate in very specific areas. Like the sound goo, when you go goo, you can resonate it in the spine, and you can really feel it going up and down the spine. The sound gee resonates the nerves that come off the spine. And then every organ has a sound, every body part. Then we've put together about 40 sounds. We call it the sonic anatomy. And we started doing a program called Sing the Body Electric, where we have people come in and we do hours of toning. We have them sing happy birthday to themselves at the beginning, and then we go through this whole sonic anatomy and breathing, and I tune the whole group. And then at the end, and it's like an 8-hour workshop, at the end, we have everybody sing happy birthday to themselves again. Now, we haven't practiced singing at all, right? All we've done is go in and kind of clean out the pipes of our inner pipe organ, all those different places that we've shut down. And the difference is so amazing. Like people are more soulful, and they're more creative, and they're more embodied, and they enjoy using their voice, right? And I think this is something that really has been taken away from so many people, like me, and trauma, or mostly it's trauma of some kind or another. And we live in this world where like they're the stars, and we're not that, and never will be. And so people don't recognize the brilliance, the power, the uniqueness of their own human instruments. So I'm really, really loving that work right now. Working with voice, because it's so immediate, it's so it's so free, and it's so liberating. And I think for me, the journey of healing that I started when I was 18 reading self-help books is really about liberation and freedom, this urge to freedom, whatever that feels like. And I really don't think that we can enter into a state of feeling like a liberated, free human unless our voice is free. And so that's what this work is really about, is about liberating the voice and liberating people to step into their own gift of enjoying their human instrument. And so that, combined with the biofield tuning and the tuning fork work, sort of like sound from the outside, working in your biofield anatomy, sound from the inside with your voice. And it's incredibly useful. It's really helpful. I think as a provider, 27 years I've had a practice treating people with tuning forks, although I haven't really much in the last few years. And really what I treat in people is stuckness. Like anybody who comes, looking for help, you're stuck. You got some kind of physical pain or emotional or mental. You can't sort it out from the inside. And this work with sound, whether it's the tuning forks or the voice or both, really gets people unstuck. It gets their electrical system back in order. It gets them moving. It gets their creative juices flowing. It gets them to advocate for themselves more, to have better boundaries, better digestion, like all kinds of stuff. Like what people are looking for, the healing, the getting unstuck, is really, really accessible with sound.
Wow, it's so I just what you're doing is so important and impressive, that you really you're so curious about things, and don't just say wonder about that, but you really put in hard work and intention to figure these things out. And so, I mean, I kind of feel a little bit of that. I wasn't a musician starting out. I didn't really learn till late in life to enjoy music or even know that I could play music. So I think you're exactly right about being liberating for people, and more people who can free themselves, sort of the better off we'll be. And what I had found initially so intriguing was just the way that you have really outlined almost kind of like a theory of existence. Not just the human body and the electrical aspects and the torus shaped energy field that we have and all that, but just what's out there. I mean, in your books, when you talk about the ether and plasma and other things like that, it begins to put things together. I've read a lot about quantum physics and things like that. I don't always understand it, but they talk about dark energy and dark matter, and most of what is out there we don't even know. And when you explain it, it's like, oh, well, this actually makes sense. Do you mind just talking a little bit about that aspect of, maybe not necessarily specifically related to music, but what is the ether? I mean, how does this tie into what we are, and how can it benefit us to know about it, really?
Yeah. Well, I think it might be helpful to talk about plasma first, because it was really kind of a pivotal moment in my journey into this whole concept of electric health. And that is that I was in graduate school, and I was starting to work on a master's thesis. Part of, I got guidance with the tuning fork work. I did it for 10 years as a hobby. And I just worked directly over the body because, what else would I do? and I developed some neat little protocols. Like I discovered that as I passed the tuning fork over people's bodies, that the tone would change. In some places it would go really loud. In other places it would go really quiet or get absorbed really fast. In some places it would sound like it was full of noise or static. And early skeptics said to me, oh, that's just the Doppler effect, or that's just room acoustics. And I was like, I get those things, but there is actually something else going on here. And of course, what I figured out is that everything in the body is in motion. Everything in motion makes waves, and waves propagate. We're always evaporating. So we've got a little cloud of water around us. And then we have these waves of information where everything in your body is giving off waves, and it's all coming from your body's electrical system and the movement, the flow of charge through your biofield, right? I didn't know any of that in the beginning. And so early on, I discovered that I could actually move spots that I found that were loud with the tuning fork. I called it click, drag, and drop. Like if I was scanning somebody, and let's say they said they had pain in a shoulder, I discovered that it would be loud, like where they had pain, and then it would be quiet in the energy center or the midline of the body. And then I could actually stick the fork in the loud spot, use it like a magnet, click on it, drag it, and then drop it into the middle. And it would feel like it was sucked in. And then people would be like, oh, wow, I don't have pain anymore. So that was like this little hobby practice where I'd scan people, I'd find the loud spots, I'd move them to the center. People would say things like, wow, I feel more centered. I feel more relaxed. I was like, that's cool. But it was also really weird, and I started doing this in Connecticut in 1996. So I was very, encountered quite a lot of skepticism and dismissal and whatever, but it was fascinating. So I kept going with it as a hobby. But then in 2006, I discovered completely by accident in a very random way that the person that I was treating had a loud spot 2.5 feet off of the side of their neck. And they had all this pain, pulling and discomfort in their neck and their jaw. And I found this loud spot out here. And I was like, what the heck do I do with that? But then I realized then I'd been moving everything to center. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just do that. Right. And it was the weirdest thing to like stick a tuning fork in this loud spot way off somebody's body and be like, kind of pull it in. And then I got it to the center and went like it got sucked in. And then she called me the next day and she's like, Eileen, all of that pain and pulling is completely gone. And she'd been to all kinds of other providers and gotten nowhere. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So then the next people who started coming in, I started exploring the atmosphere around their body. And I started discovering all of this information, things that felt like walls and channels and rivers and vortices and voids. And like there was like this whole sort of unseen territory hidden in plain view that had this whole anatomy and physiology to it. And the tuning fork kind of created like this sort of wall of sound that made it all audible. It was so wild. And I discovered that there was a whole language to the vibration of the fork. It was kind of like teaching myself sonic braille. And it took about 4 years to sort of map the whole area and discover like, wow, this is actually our mind. And in this model, our body is inside our mind, not the other way around. And where we go out of balance in our mind and our thinking and our emotions, then that pulls the body out of whack. So just for example, I discovered that, everybody who came in who had right hip pain had this busy mind and busy body, and they were always like thinking ahead, all these things they had to do. And they were literally pulling their biofield like off on their right side, running more magnetic charge there. Well, magnetic fields, which the biofield is, guide and inform electric current. So if you have this mental imbalance that's showing up in your right hip, then, and that is mental, but it's magnetic as well, it will pull the electric current over to that side of the body. And that's too much voltage through the wires is often what causes pain for people. So in Biofield Tuning, we do these adjustments of the magnetic field in order to get the electricity to run straight in the body. I like call myself a bioelectrician, basically rewiring people with sound. But I didn't understand it. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't know what this stuff is. I don't understand. I just didn't understand. I never knew that the body had an electrical system. And so one night, as I'm like starting to realize that it's my job to figure all this out, my son just had his 12th birthday and I'd given him some books on science for his birthday. He came to the dinner table and he said, did you know there's a fourth state of matter called plasma? And I was like, solid, liquid, gas. I was like, oh, somehow like I missed an entire state of matter. And so I went and I started researching it, and I went down this plasma rabbit hole, and I spent the next 4 months learning everything I could about plasma. And I even did an independent study on plasma for my master's degree. And it really opened up the whole world of light and connectivity, right? Our cosmological story is dark. Everything is separate, dark energy, dark matter, black holes. It's all mysterious. It's all entropy, right? It's all billiard ball particles that are just like going, it's all going down. It's all scattering out. And it's a very depressing cosmological story. And it's completely devoid of light and completely devoid of connectivity. And, even though I had really been a seeker since I was 18 and I had read endless books, I can read and process information very quickly. So like devour and like all of these books, I still had, and I'd done all kinds of body work, I still had this like kind of chronic low level angst, like something was missing, right? And then what I discovered was missing was plasma. Like it was the light. And the light that we seek had been, in my education, like completely taken out of the cosmological story. we weren't taught about plasma at all. But then I'm going online, I'm like 99.999% of the universe is plasma. I'm like, what? Like, how is it even possible that it's everywhere, right? The sun is a plasma, our atmosphere is a plasma. The magnetic field that surrounds our body, that our living electrical system is a bioplasma. So the flow of electric current is light.
And the
And I
northern
would
lights.
even, what's that?
Northern lights.
Yeah, northern lights are a plasma. Lightning is a plasma. You get a spark, that's a plasma. So plasma is everywhere. It's absolutely ubiquitous. Our environment, right? This is like charged. We live in a charged plasma environment that gets even more electrical the more you go up in elevation. So it's everywhere. It's all around us, and it's connective. And it made me realize, like, wow, the body actually has an electrical system in its entirety. Like, we're missing the forest for the trees. We've been so taught to think compartmentalized, like, oh, my nervous system is electric. Oh, my heartbeat is electric. My brain waves are electrical. My blood is carrying a charge. My bones are crystals that make electricity when they're compressed. So like, you're seeing all these bits and pieces of electricity in the body, but missing the fact that there is an electrical system in its entirety. And this is what I would even call our soul. Like, it is the biological illumination of self, that consciousness that we experience as self. When you die, your light goes out. Your body's still there, but what has happened is your biofield, your body's electrical system, has gone out, right? So to me, what we call the biofield is the same as your body's electrical system. It's your mind, it's your conscious mind, it's your subconscious mind, it's where all your memories are stored. So we're told that our memories are stored in the brain, but what I found was that our memories are stored in standing waves in our biofield. And that was part of mapping the field, was being able to be like, okay, this zone is birth, and this is when you were 30, and this is related to every time you felt sad and every time you felt angry. And I can, with TeamForks, go through somebody and read them like a book, tell them everything that happened in their life, tell them, because it's all encoded vibrationally in these standing waves in the field around us. So this idea that we have an electrical system, that we live in an electrical environment, is not taught to us. And so when I wrote Tuning the Human Biofield, I was like, I have to reframe our entire cosmological story in order for what I'm doing with the tuning forks around the body to make sense. Right? So that was this whole bringing in the plasma piece and the bioplasma piece. But then I discovered that I could do biofield tuning at a distance. And that was like a really weird thing, because people asked me for years, so like, can you do this at a distance? I was like, no. Like, what a dumb question. It just seemed so I was like, this is physics, it's sound waves on the body, like, I'm not doing this at a distance. But then Dr. Carl Merritt, who's an MD in California, who wrote the foreword to Tuning the Human Biofield and who helped me quite a lot with my research, asked me if I wanted to try an experiment and try doing it with him at a distance. And, I'm a scientist. I was skeptical, but I'm a scientist and I like experiments. I was like, I'm willing to give this a go. So he lay down on a treatment table in his office in California, and I pretended that he was on my treatment table in Vermont. We didn't have any open line of communication. We were just connecting through intention. And I approached the table as if I had a client there. And my standard practice is to just start combing through the field. And back then I'd comb through the whole field, read and adjust everything. And so I started going in, and much to my amazement, the same pattern that I would find if there was a body there was there with no body there, which just completely blew my mind. So I went through and I took notes, all the things like, you have inflammation here, this organ isn't working, your mom had this personality, your dad in the ages this were difficult, you had a head injury when you're, like all the things that I learned to discern from this sonic braille language. And then we got on the phone and I went through my notes, and he was like, Eileen, all of that is exactly correct. And I felt a state change, like I feel lighter. And he tested his blood sugar before and after and noticed a noteworthy change. So that just blew my mind. I was like, well, how is that even possible? Right. And I think, a lot of this, the spooky action at a distance and the attempt to explain it is often the concept of quantum entanglement is used. But I don't really find, like you said earlier, like the whole quantum thing is like really hard to understand. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I know that like true quantum professionals, engineers and stuff really get a bee in their bonnet when people like Deepak Chopra talk about quantum healing. Like they really can't stand this sort of new age latching on to misrepresenting quantum. And if you go and you look up the definition of quantum, it's not useful. It's like the definition is really tiny. It's like things that are really small. I'm like, well, how is that useful in any way, right? I mean, so much of what I'm always looking for is information that's useful, that shines light on something, that gives you an aha, that makes dots connect and lights come on, right? And I just never felt that way. Whenever I tried to go into quantum and understand, I felt like I was traversing a swamp and I got nowhere. And I was like, well, this isn't useful to talk about it in this way. So, and I also find that like it kind of leaves out the ether. So what is the ether, right? So this is the fifth state of matter, or really it's the first state of matter, because it's what all of the other states of matter come from. And fundamentally, I love the definition. It is a luminiferous ocean of clear light. It is the substrata that through torsion spins itself into plasma, into the positive and negative charges. And then it's this whole dance of the positive and negative charges and light spinning itself and spinning itself that gives rise to the world that we see, which appears to be solid, but that solidity is in effect an artifact of our perception. That ultimately it's all just a field of light and information, and it's all ether. So the ether spins itself into plasma, and then the plasma joins up and it creates gases and then liquids and solids. But ultimately, it's all one thing. It's all this fabric, and everything that ever is, was, or will ever be is present in the ether. It is the substrata of life. It is the essence, the quintessence of where everything arises from and then falls back into. And because the ether is all one thing, it has immediate self-awareness. Nothing needs to travel through it. So if you, Jefferson, exist outside of you here, right? And we can identify you in the space around you. I can find your memories. I can find your mental habits and proclivities, your desires, all these things. If I can find you out here, where do you end?
That's a good question. I guess you don't. We're all connected.
You don't. We're all connected. We're all connected. We're all connected to the ether, to the one, instantaneously. So after I worked on Dr. Merritt, then the next person was my friend Brendan Murphy, who's in Australia, really brilliant guy. And I met Brendan because he had written an article about the ether that I came across when I was doing research for my thesis in my book. And so Brendan and I became friends. And so I'm like, okay, let's see if I know that it works from Vermont to California, but will it work all the way to Australia instantaneously? And it did. And I was able to tune in, read and adjust his field, tell him all kinds of things about himself. We weren't in contact. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is like instantaneous. Even if somebody was on the moon, if we believe that's possible, then it would be instantaneous. So this is the nature of the ether, is that it's all one. It is a library. Also, we could call it the Akasha or the Akashic record. And I can pluck anything from the ether right here. I can pull up your field right here because you are here.
It's so profound and interesting and also hopeful because, you grow up in the, many of us, the Christian tradition, and we study Western medicine and Western thought. And all of a sudden, these other things start poking at us and we start learning more. For example, Rupert Sheldrake, of course, who talks about the theory of morphic resonance, where he says, yeah, your memories are not in your brain. They're out here somewhere. And what is it that accounts? How do you account for the fact that dogs can sense when their humans are coming home before they're coming home, and all these things, as you mentioned, the spooky action at a distance, and it gives me an optimism that, well, maybe things are not so completely weird. Maybe they make a lot more sense. So, in the context of music, I'd like to just talk for a moment and ask, maybe we can talk about this together. Well, if you could talk about this from your perspective, the beginning of Spirit of Music Camp, Victor Wooten's Spirit of Music Camp. Just one of those moments. Victor is amazing. If anybody out there doesn't know him, he's 5-time Grammy Award winner with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. But the way I came into all of this was his book, The Music Lesson, and his book, The Spirit of Music, which he turned into audiobooks, soundtracks for books, which is such a great thing. And there's more to talk about there too. But so, Vic there's a camp, Wooten Woods, out about an hour west of Nashville in Tennessee, out in the woods near the Duck River. And he's had these camps there for many years, bass camp, bass nature camp, music nature camp, because, Vic sort of sees the connection in all these things. And I had gone a couple of years to Spirit of Music Camp before the pandemic. And this fall, there was one, the first time back in a long time. And you were invited to be a presenter. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. And and so I was there for a couple of days at Theory of Music Camp, and we had a little tribe of people were trying to learn some theory, and then I guess it was Thursday of that week we started Spirit of Music Camp, and I remember seeing you and hearing you comment as we were getting started about, boy, there sure is a high energy level here in this room, in this big barn where we all were. And, you would expect in a way that Vic would come out and say, well, welcome to Spirit of Music Camp, but no, he comes out and he kind of just says, quiet down, everybody. And then you came out with tuning forks and just started hitting your tuning forks. And so we're all quiet and we're really paying attention. And I don't know, maybe this is where, do you take over, or how do we tell this story?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting story. So Victor came up to me just as everybody's gathered, right? And we're getting ready to start. And he says to me, go out into the audience there, walk around the barn and pick someone. And I was like, what for? And he's like, I'll tell you later. He's like, just go pick somebody. So I went and I took a circle around the room and I picked somebody at the very back table. I didn't know the guy, but for whatever reason, he just grabbed me. So I came back and I told Victor who it was. And he said, okay, this is what I want you to do. He said, I want you to start playing your tuning forks. And I want you to very consciously direct the energy of the intention of the sound to that guy in the back. Now, don't look at him more, like don't let on, that you're sending energy to him, but I want you to just hold that attention and send energy to him. And I went over to my friend who was there with me and I explained what was going on, Robin. And I was like, Robin, what if this doesn't work? Like, this is not a very good first impression to make, with that, because I had never been there before. And so, but Victor had told me about this before, that he had done this at previous camps and that it had worked. So it wasn't, so I knew about it. It wasn't completely throwing me in the deep end. So I did. And I just, got my first, didn't say anything, just started off the whole program and just very consciously sending to him in the back. But what was really interesting was that there was another guy on the other side of the room about halfway through, Mateo. And Mateo was so excited to be there, and he was so happy to be seeing me. And so Mateo was just like sending me all of this energy. And so I couldn't help but like it was almost like he drew it out of me, like a few tendrils of energy went to Mateo, even though I wasn't trying to. It was just that he had so much charge, he was attracting it. And so when I finished, and I only did it for a few minutes, Victor said, "Will one person in the room stand up?" And the guy in the back, Brian, right?
Yep.
Brian shot up out of his seat like a rocket, like a rocket. He was just like, boom.
Yeah.
And then Mateo stood up after him more slowly. And I was like, wow, well, I didn't know this, but Victor had written Brian's name down on a grease board facing the other direction up on the stage. So when Brian stood up, Victor turned around the board and it had Brian's name on it.
It was so amazing. I was kind of perceiving what was going on a little bit. You were talking with Vic, and then you went over there and whatever. But I talked to Brian later, and he said as soon as the tuning fork started, he felt like a lightning bolt in his chest. He just felt something coming at him. He didn't really even know how to talk or breathe or what to think. But as soon as Vic said, "Does somebody want to stand up?" He said, "Oh yeah, this is me for sure." And it was very profound when, everybody realized that you were sending this intention to Brian. So then we did a few more things, and you were involved in this one too. So I'd like to talk about it a little bit as well. So because it relates to the same thing. And so we were up, and part of the group was up on the stage in the barn, and it was a kind of a tight fit. Maybe there was 20 people around on the stage, and we're all trying to fit in our chairs, and we have instruments, and Vic says, "Okay," to the person to the left of him, and I ended up sitting right next to Vic, and you were next to me, and Robin was on the other side of you, and then Gregory was on the other side. So Vic says, "Okay," to the first person, "just play 3 or 4 notes, but keep repeating it." So it was dun, 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 whatever. The next person, he says, "just add 3 or 4 notes, doesn't matter what key or anything." And the next person, "just try to fit in and make it smooth, make it harmonize." The next person, "bum bum ding," and different instruments. And one person was singing, "Oh," and it was coming around to the circle, and there's maybe 15, 18 people. And as soon as they start making the first people started playing, Vic leans over to me and he says, "Pick somebody, and when it comes time for you to play with intention of sending that to the person. Don't look at them or anything, and just do that." And I'm like, holy smokes, what am I doing here? So in addition to thinking of, what 4 notes am I going to play? How are you going to, fit in? I'm thinking, who do I send this to? And I thought about this, and then I thought, well, Robin is new, your friend Robin, and maybe I'll just try to send it to her, make her feel welcome. I don't know why I picked her. And so it comes around to me, and I start playing, and it's a little bit like you do when you're playing your tuning fork and sending intention. What are you saying to yourself? I'm like, okay, Robin, here comes my music. I'm sending you this intention with love and yada yada, or whatever's happening. I don't know. Gradually, after I start playing, people on the other side of Vic starts to stop playing, and they start playing, going around the circle. So it's getting quieter and quieter. It's coming all the way around to me and stops. And Vic says, "Anybody want to stand up?" And some guy over there stood up, and then somebody else stood up, and then Robin stood up. I'm like, oh, okay. One other person stood up. And then Vic says, "Does anybody want to sit down?" And somebody sat down, and then Robin sat down, and I was kind of a little bummed, actually. And finally he says, "Okay, Jefferson, who did you pick?" And I said, "Well, it was Robin." He said, "Well, that's pretty good. It was close. There were just a few people. Some people felt it." And so I'm really curious. Later on, I'm like, I go up to Robin because I'm like, did you feel anything? Was anything going on? And she says to me, I quote, I fucked up. She said, I knew that was for me, but I was a little tentative in getting up. And then when Vic said, does somebody want to sit down? I thought, well, somebody has to sit down. And she said that and as you and Robin were walking out of the barn after this class, this session, you said, why did you sit down? And it just occurred to me, I mean, she felt it, whatever it was I was sending, but you felt it too. And it's quite a powerful thing if we can send these intentions to people. Can you comment on that one? Because
Yeah. Well, I do my best to not think. I try very hard to not think and to just really be. I've really found, again, in many years of treating people that, most people are stuck because they don't have any mental discipline. And their mind just goes and goes and goes. People have multiple voices in their head. They're the inner critic. There's attack and defense. There's guilt and shame. There's a whole lot of noise going on in most people's heads. And so because I've spent so many hours, like I used to work 40 hours a week doing tunings, listening, right? I put my brain into an alpha brainwave state where I'm just really deeply listening to the overtones, the undertones, what I feel in my body, like very, very present, very quiet inside, and very much paying attention. And so there's a whole sort of way of being with sound that you don't think about, you just do. And so I gave the example because people afterwards were like, what did you do, Eileen? How did you do this? And Victor's an advocate, he was like, you just do it. Like, don't necessarily give people the steps because you want them to find their own way. But I was like, no, I'm going to tell you all how I did it and how it relates to this book that I've been reading about the the tribe in Peru, spelled Quero, I think it is. Because I'm going to Peru in December, and I'm going to be hanging out with this indigenous shamanic people. And so I wanted to learn about it before I went. And so I've just been reading in this book about it, about how they see that we have ley lines between us as people, maybe what we might call chords in our lingo, but that basically we have illuminated pathways of light, of plasma that flow between us. And that every time we spend time together or we think of each other or, people that we are connected to, we are literally connected to with these lines of light, just like the telluric currents that are also known as dragon lines, that are flows of magnetic energy in the earth that humans can capture and make use of through stone circles or through obelisks, right? These magnetic currents. Now, Wikipedia will tell you that ley lines or dragon lines are pseudoscience, but they really are the exact same thing as telluric currents. And if you go and look up telluric currents, it's the same thing. Now, these telluric currents have all been mapped, but you can't find the maps of these telluric currents because they're all owned by the oil and gas companies who don't want you to know that we live in a free energy environment and that this is all around us to be tapped. And that it appears there were previous cultures that knew how to harness the ambient electricity in the air and make use of it, right? So this has all been hidden from us. This whole the light and connectivity, right? The ether and the plasma are light and they're connective. And in this world of darkness and separation, they don't want you to know about that. And so this whole idea of what happened between Brian and I feels like magic, but it isn't. It's a law of nature and it's the way plasma behaves. So when I was activating the tuning fork, I was very much with my intention, with my awareness, with my imagination, directing one of these ley lines, these illuminated ropes, to him. So when he said he felt like he got, lightning, that's what it was. Like I threw a plasma rope at him, and with every strike of the fork, I just kept on energizing that connection. and very clearly, even though I'm like looking around at everybody else, I'm like, here I am just activating my forks. You guys have no idea what's going on. My intention was super clear. And, because Victor had us do that exercise that you were talking about on the stage, which was the first time I've ever played a tuning fork as an instrument in a jam, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Wow.
I was like, I don't even know how I would play a tuning fork, but I played it on every 16th beat. And it was so spare, but it fit in. So that was kind of exciting to just do that, because people had asked me, like, can you use your tuning fork as an instrument? I was like, no, but then I did. So that was pretty cool. But the last person that he had direct energy across from, I saw it. Like, I saw the beam of light going across the stage, and the person it was directed to, like, knew that it was them. So this is plasma. And how we can direct plasma very consciously with our intention, and how we can augment and strengthen that by adding sound and music to it.
So it's plasma because the ether is sort of the underlying, and the plasma is more I don't know. I don't even know what to say, but
The movement.
that would be the movement. So this also happened at the same time. We're up on the stage, and after a couple of these, Vic asked somebody, does anybody want to try it and play something for somebody? And Rachel stood up with her trumpet and played. And when it first happened, she's very powerful, and she played that trumpet. I was like, wow, this feels, is this me? I don't know. And so she played for a while. And when Vic asked if anybody would like to stand up, I started to stand up, but before I could even get out of my seat, everybody else said, whoa, because Gregory, who was right over there, he immediately stood up, and Rachel said, yes, that's who I was playing it for. And I felt it, and Robin said she felt it, and you felt it. So I was like, what is this? Is intention like a breeze? But you're kind of saying it's like a light movement. Is that how you would describe that? As sort of, there was plasmic intention, or?
Yeah, no, it is. It's plasma. And we have the ability to direct the plasma, direct the ether with our intention. And intention plays, like, everybody's using it all the time. Like, when you walk through an airport, the reason why all of these hundreds of people don't bump into each other is because we're all sensing each other's intentions. We're seeing and feeling, it's like, I'm going this way, and this person's like, I'm going this way, and that's how we don't bump into each other. It's the same kind of energy that we are perceiving through our eyes, this sort of magnetic, intentional projecting that we see and sense. And so people are doing this all the time. They just aren't doing it consciously, and they don't even really realize they're doing it. So when you take this whole ability to, like, throw intention, right, to really cast intention, and you do it in a very focused way, what is your attention but your field, which is electric, which is a plasma?
It makes so much sense. And it's also, again, to me, the purpose for starting the Planetary Gig Society was to make some positive changes somehow, maybe through music and understanding music. And our focus is not on, how you learn to play, but what is music and how does it connect us and all these kinds of things. So you posted something on Facebook just the other day, I think, and it related to, I can't remember, but the words that come to mind are sort of collective intention. I might have said, so how does this, you were saying something about prayer. And I said, well, if we know that, referring in my mind to what we did at Vic's camp, if we can have intention and direct it somewhere and it can be felt, then shouldn't we be able to be pretty effective or something with our collective intention to bring maybe more harmony or whatever? And you said something like it's syntropic action, and you also mentioned spontaneous coherent emergence. And I felt, Wow, now this sounds really good. So this is another thing I'd like to ask you about is because there's a lot of stuff going on, in this world that's not so great and just seems totally out of what I believe. My interactions with human beings are not like this at all. But how and you also talked about, doing songs or playing music with particular kinds of harmonic vibration. I don't know. How do you talk? How do you, I don't know, explain what are your thoughts about these things I'm mentioning in terms of collective intention or effect that we can have or do?
Yeah. Well, I do occasionally these events called Sonic Sundays on YouTube where I come in at 10 o'clock, go live, and I do a group tuning. And I'm around, I travel a lot, so I can't do them consistently, and I kind of pop them in when I can. And so I have time this Sunday, the November 5th. But I didn't have a topic. And so sometimes I'd like to look to other people for inspiration. And so I just put out on Facebook, what would you like? What are you struggling with? What would you like to see be a theme? And one of the responses was about praying for peace. And I started thinking about that and about what is going on in the world and how what we are witnessing, and this has been going on for a long time, but it is really ramped up, is divide and conquer, is division. Right? And this even goes to the cosmological story, which is everything is separate. And everything is dark, and you are no different. You are all separate. You are all dark. You are all bad. Should all be guilty. There's this very big diminishment and dividing us against each other, but also dividing us within ourselves. And most people are suffering in a state of inner division. And they do not have a sense of themselves as whole. They do not have inner peace or tranquility. People are very anxious in our culture. People are very fearful. People have very low self-worth. They're just riddled with this story of not good enough. And so if that is the state of your electrical system, that you are inwardly divided and you are anxious and you are fearful about the future and you are engaged in attack and defense within yourself, if you sit around in that vibrational state, mentally praying for peace, that's not very helpful because you are a weak, incoherent signal. Like, it doesn't matter if you spend half an hour or whatever a day praying, because the whole rest of the time, every breath, every heartbeat is imprinting incoherence into our collective morphic field. Right? So this whole idea of like staying at home by yourself in your incoherent state, praying for peace, seemed so flaccid and weak and ineffectual and inappropriate, given the force of chaos, of division, of entropy and destruction that is coming our way. Well, I'm just going to sit home and pray for peace. I was like, no, you're not. Like, that's not going to work. And so I realized that we need to enact the opposite force, right? So if everything is about division, then we need to find wholeness within ourselves. And the only thing that we can affect is what's going on in us and what the collective vibe we're putting out 24/7 into the world is, because we all add up into a sum total, right? So we need to find wholeness. There's entropy, right? Everything is like, what's the opposite of entropy? Is syntropy. We never learn about syntropy.
Right.
All we learn about is like everything's falling apart. We don't ever learn that actually everything is coming together too. The tree is growing. I grew a baby in my belly. Like as a mother of children, I'm constantly creating order. I'm like that. I am syntropic. My children are entropic. I am syntropic. You make the mess, I come clean it up, right? So we need syntropy, and syntropy is creative. So to not be destructive, but rather to be creative, to be constructive. And then chaos, right? There's chaos. Well, what's the opposite of that? Is coherence, order. And so these are all things that I feel we need to radically assert the need to develop and express in ourselves, not sit around praying for peace, but like dynamically, syntropically, coherently, from a place of wholeness, be creative, be like take action in some way or another. And some people were like got a little bent about that because they're attached to the idea of praying for peace, and it can't hurt. But if you're not dealing with your own inner division and entropy, and you're not going to be effective in your prayers. So I think it's important. A few things are important. I think it's important that we come together and do things together, because then we will produce a stronger signal. Right. So I think it's really important. Like, so what I actually got inspired to do was to invite people when I do my next Sonic Sunday to all come with their instruments, whether they're tuning forks or bowls or their voices. And I have a full-size medical skeleton named Mr. Bones in my office that I used for various applications. And interestingly, at one of the last in-person classes that I taught, we had about 20, almost 30 people in the room. And it's a 3-day class. The morning of each class day, I put Mr. Bones in the middle of the room, and I had everybody take out their 144 hertz tuning forks. And we all activated our tuning forks. I mean, it was inspired. Actually, this was after Spirit of Music Camp. So it was inspired by that experience of being able to direct intention, right? I'm like, okay, let's all do this. So I got 30 people and everybody's pointing their forks at Mr. Bones. And what he is representing, he's a surrogate for the human family, Like, all the soul of humanity, Mr. Bones is embodying that. Which makes me think of a funny joke that somebody told me recently. He said, I recently got a DNA test and I got the results back. And it turns out that I'm related to everybody. So yeah, right. I mean, it's true. Like, we are a human family, and like most individual families, we are dysfunctional. We don't know how to get along. I mean, what's happening in the Middle East is a willful failure of diplomacy. It is an absolute willful failure of diplomacy. And so, and that is going on in the micro everywhere. And it's even going on in the micro within people, where there's so much like attack and defense going on inside of people, right? Not surprising that that is informing what is going on in the morphic field, and vice versa. So anyway, we did this, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. We just hung out and like shot Mr. Bone with our plasma streams of coherence. And on the third morning, right towards the very end, all of a sudden the energy shifted, because it had been kind of like, wah, wah. Like, well, I don't know if we're doing anything here. I don't know if anything's happening. But all of a sudden, at the very end, like this energy of joy and celebration kind of broke out of him. It was just, and we all felt it. We all felt the shift, because I don't think we really knew where it was going to go. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, we're sending coherence. We're not sending peace. Like, as you said in the beginning, like, I'm not a huge fan of the word peace. It's just a little too flaccid and a little too static. Harmony is dynamic, like resonant interplay, right? That's a lot more interesting to me. Like, I just prefer it. But we weren't even intending that. We were just like coherence. We're just sending coherent energy, and it's going to do what it will. And the fact that we all perceived it breaking out into this joy and celebration and dance, like joy, like this is really human nature, that when you get the noise out of people's signal and you amplify the true tone of what it means to be human, it is joyful. It is creative. It is playful. It is so musical, right? It just wants to sing and dance. This is our human nature, is very much that. And that is such a big part of what has been taken away from us. Like I said earlier, our ability to sing, our comfort in dancing, the fact that humans historically have always done this together. And now, especially since COVID, I mean, music took a really big hit during COVID, and this ability to be together and to sing. And people feel guilty for having a good time, for laughing, for dancing. Like, there's this so much shame and guilt and woe and doom, that this whole idea that you might still be at liberty to sing and dance and feel joyful, it almost feels like a sin to people.
It also makes me think of indigenous thought and perspectives, because certainly, and I can't, apologize for any cruelty or, murder or killing or whatever the indigenous people may have done in our whole history of humanity. But one of the things that I learned is that they were about sort of these extra normal, in a way, sort of things, extra cognitive. I think Tyson Yunkaporta in his book Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World, talks about, and that the indigenous people did dance and sing and did things together for all kinds of things, bringing rain and whatever, or bringing more animals that we would think would be kind of frou-frou or weird, or can you really do that? But it seems like our home is back, where what you're talking about, that coherence. So, I mean, we do know, we understand about the power of music. I mean, you can turn on the car radio or whatever you have in your car when you drive somewhere, and it can change your mood. And you can see it in concerts and all sorts of things. So at this moment of inflection, maybe, and we're talking to musicians in general, what can musicians do about this kind of thing? How can we do some things collectively? And it also just brings me to what Michael says, Michael Cott, the inspiration for Michael, the teacher, in Victor's book. He says, when you play, you're thinking, you're kind of sending out what you want to send out is, I bring you the healing vibrations, for I am peace. And however you want to say that, but it seems to me there's something we can do as musicians and others, because we're all really musicians, if you want to know the truth, I think. But
absolutely,
any thoughts about that? I mean,
well, what we're going to do, well, just for an example, like what I'm going to have people do in Sonic Sunday, I'm going to park Mr. Bones next to me, and I'm going to just repeat the same thing that I did in that class, which is everybody use your instrument and your intentions to send this plasma stream of coherence for the human family. Because if the collective human family gets more and more coherent, then we build that coherence into the system, and then that's informing us. Like we are all informed by the information, by the strength of the information that is in the collective. And it also happens locally, because when we avail ourselves to becoming channels for this work and this intention, we bring it into ourselves. We bring more God, more life, more love into our own being. Who knows how that ripples out into the world around you? If you're in a good mood and you bump into somebody and you make them smile and laugh, and then they bump into somebody, they make them smile and laugh, and like maybe that averts somebody hitting somebody 4 blocks away, because they just caught this good vibe that you sent out that kind of shifted their state and made them disinclined towards some non-beneficial thing that they might have been tilting towards, right? So on both a local level of just sending out energy into our environment, and the non-local morphic field, everything that we do together has some kind of impact, even when we do alone, but it's minimal, right? So the more people you have in the same rhythm and vibe and intention, the more powerfully that is going to impact locally and non-locally. Now, I've had this vision for a long time, like probably since 2006 or 2007, to create this in a stadium kind of setting, where the musicians completely get what we're talking about, this being coherent, being in prayer, sending coherent energy, and that we get the entire everybody involved in it. And this is the beautiful thing about the sonic anatomy and the sing the body electric work, is that we can warm up a group of people in pretty short order to feel more confident singing, right? So I think that there's a way to take music, to take song and verses, and not just see that. I think a lot of musical performers, like, it's all about them performing. What I'm really interested in, and one of the reasons why I wanted to learn to sing and to sing comfortably and confidently, is I'm not interested in having you watch me. I want to support you in singing. I'm there to get the audience to sing and to feel comfortable, because I want to hear 30,000 people sing together, very intentionally, while I've got a band that is absolutely supporting that coherence and bringing people into that natural state of joy and our human coherent expression. And and I know that like singing and playing music together, people can be the most joyful experience. Like of all the things I've done, like nothing makes me feel better than that. It feels so good, right? It's such good medicine. So music is the medicine, but I also think like it's really important to involve and engage the audience, right? There's a great line from Joseph Wooten. I don't know what song it's from, but I actually saw the Wooten brothers here in Vermont last month. And the line is, everybody's waiting for the hero, but the hero is in everybody. And that is where our salvation comes in with the return of Christ consciousness isn't in just one person, but in the arising, the awakening, the dawning of the light in all of us, and us recognizing that, just how powerful and connected we are. And so I really feel like this whole sort of plasma cosmology, electric health, waking people up to their electrical systems, to the connectivity and the power that we have, that we can create these ropes between us with intention and make sound together coherently, can be massively impactful, not just for the people who get to participate in the process, but it ripples out very powerfully from there. So that is something I'm kind of angling towards, and I don't know exactly what that will look like. But I think over the years, especially over the last few years, I've had a number of musicians reach out to me, and they're like, I want my music to be more healing. But what the real magic is actually in the intention, more so than what frequencies you might be playing. Now, that said, I do think that Roy Wooten is really onto something in the way that he's playing with these different systems for musical scaling. And I'm really interested in that, because I find the C major scale, whether it's 440 or 432, it's just not going where I feel like music wants to bring me. I feel like there's a whole sort of extra dimension or more of what it means to be human that's just waiting to be unlocked with the right set of tones, the right scale. And I think it's something maybe we've never heard before, or it's ancient and it has been lost. So I think if we combine intention with this very sort of mindful, like I describe it, now I'm not a musician, I don't know music theory, I can't really read music. And I think because I'm not a musician, I'm not as attached to the Western musical scale, because a lot of people are so inside that box that it's really hard for them to think outside of it. But I described it as it is to the regular scale as 3D chess is to regular chess. Like there's some kind of extra dimension in this particular canon of musicality that I think has the potential to really unlock a whole lot of human potential that we've been denied access to.
Well, that makes sense to me. It's a great vision. We have this Planetary Gig Society, and it's another story, but we sort of set up this council of music shamans, and just to try to discuss things that are a little outside the box when it comes to music, maybe that can help. And one of the Wooten Woods guys, John Tinger, he sent me a message and said, well, Vic has this focal dystonia with his hand, which he talked about a lot at camp, and you know about it, and that's how you got introduced, or Victor found you or something, because maybe you could help heal that. And anyway, John said, what if we Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, what if a bunch of us just played to help heal that, Victor's focal dystonia? And I thought, well, I've had trigger finger, and a lot of people have had other issues, repetitive stress type things from playing. So maybe we could direct our intention to that. And I guess it's a little bit like distance tuning or distance Reiki or something. And I don't know what you think about that particular concept, but it sounds similar And it sounds like that's something maybe we could do some of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, did you tell Victor? Like, did he have a heads up that you guys were all sending energy to him?
Well, I did tell him because he came through DC with the brothers, and I told him we were going to do this. I didn't give him a specific time or anything. I don't know if we healed him or not yet, but it all does kind of make sense. And so I think it's something for musicians in particular, but more anybody to think about the effects that we can have. And I really like your concepts of the syntropic action and I wrote it
Oh
over here.
yeah, I'll tell you about that. Spontaneous coherent emergence.
Right. Spontaneous coherent
Spontaneous coherent
emergence.
emergence. Okay, so what that is in cymatics, right,
Mhm.
which is the study of sound made visible. One of the traditional ways that people have observed how these different patterns that are created is with something called a Chladni plate. So it's a flat black metal plate, and you sprinkle salt or sand on it, and then you put a speaker underneath, and you play different frequencies. And so you put in a particular frequency, and a pattern forms. And every time you play a specific frequency, that same pattern forms in the standing wave. So you can see this pattern. And then when you change the frequency, the pattern dissolves into chaos, and then a new pattern spontaneously arises, like in its full completeness. So it's like you have a pattern, and then change happens, and then you have this descent into chaos, and then suddenly you have this spontaneous coherent emergence.
Mhm.
And so while we are in right this time of chaos, of a world breaking down, an order breaking down, the frequency is changing, and the pattern is going into dissolution. But that means that what appears to be chaotic is not, because it is destined to reform in this new order, right? So I feel in people like that new order arises in us, but we have to be ready, willing, and able to go there, right? My husband, who is a very like kind of regular guy, never religious or anything like that. He said to me a few weeks ago, he said, like, I can't believe that I am saying this, but we just need to get out of the way and let God do this. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, we do. And so to me, that is that spontaneous coherent emergence, is just surrendering to how life is seeking to move us, and being free enough to be moved that way, right? Because being free isn't like living the life of your dreams, or being free to live the life of your dreams isn't about like what you think you should do. It's like the universe's plan for you, if you can just surrender and go with the flow, is so much greater and better than anything you could ever imagine, right? So that's what true freedom is to be free enough to let God, or let the pattern or the movement of life move you into this spontaneous coherent emergence. And I think that music can absolutely play a role, right? This whole sort of like, why am I so moved to liberate people? That they're free in their expression and their movement, and they're unstuck, is because, we have roles to play as the new order seeks to arise. And I also think that, like, in the Aquarian age, where everything, right, the symbol of Aquarius is waves, like it looks like electrical waves. That the notion of plasma, of ether, of the illuminated, connected, living light that we are made of and bathed in, is going to dawn on people kind of like all at once. Like, I think there's going to be this sort of big revelation about our electrical nature that is going to happen very rapidly. And that is a real game changer. Because once people understand that they're electric, that they're connected, that we can throw these ropes to each other, that we can strengthen them. Like, I just see this whole like grid of those of us who are here to do this work, like connecting, lighting up, and really informing the collective in a very conscious, connective way, that this pattern of connectivity will like whoop, just spring up and have an impact. That's just sort of my feeling into, where we're going with this. And that's the sense of it. And I think that, people watching this podcast might have a role in that. And what does that look like? Are you the one that's supposed to organize it? Like, how is this going to happen? I don't know. But I do feel like, it's necessary that we wouldn't all be here. I know so many amazing humans that are here right now had the really good fortune of this past year going from one incredible event after another, where the outcome of the event was so much coherence in the group. And this is in the Biofield Tuning community. Even that was our experience at Spirit of Music Camp. I was involved in several sound healing retreats. Like every single event with amazing people came out with just so much coherence. So this is happening. This is already building.
Yeah. And, from my personal perspective, part of it is just being open to it. After I realized that, oh gosh, music, after, reading Victor's books, etc., music is a real path to peace. And, this concept of the spirit of music, I literally said, okay, spirit of music, and you could say God or whatever else, but hey, whatever I can do, just let me know. And here comes Planetary Gig Society. And it was the same thing. And when I decided I wanted to do an audiobook, because I had to write a book first. And I just said, okay, Spirit of Music, here's another thing I'd like you to help, flow through me and help me do is write this book. And it happened. I mean, from writing books, sometimes you don't know where certain things that you wrote came from. And that was particularly the case with this book. And I do want to thank you because I asked you if you would read it and write a few words, and you did, which was amazing and great. And it's on the back of the book. The book's out. The audiobook is out. It's just about out. It's not on Audible yet, but I'm really excited about it. And I want to thank you for your confidence in that. It's called Fonging for the World. And it's about spreading the healing sounds of the universe to help create peace and harmony. So, who knows what it might take, but, I guess we're saying we're open for it and come along for the ride, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you said about this is kind of brings me back to like stop praying for peace. Like it doesn't work. But what do you do instead? Well, you open yourself up for some kind of action, to whether it's creating art, whether it's making a handmade gift for somebody, whether it is channeling a book or a song. I'm going to write the anthem that's going to bring us all together. We're all going to resonate with this powerful anthem of true freedom. Whatever it is, like ask to be a vehicle for action that is effective. Even if it's only effective to one person, that is still way better than just sitting home by yourself praying, right? And like make those prayers be use me to do your will, to bring coherence into the world, to bring more harmony, to free the humans, and then act on it. Allow yourself to be moved. I think this is what I was speaking to in the spontaneous coherent emotion emergence, that you have to be willing to be moved and to not be afraid, and to also to feel worthy of whatever it is that you are being moved to. Because a lot of people, their own false story of unworthiness gets in the way of them being able to step into whatever glory or accomplishment or amazing thing might be their job, but they're like, oh no, that's too grandiose.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. Okay. This has been great. I was, after Spirit of Music Camp in particular, I really wanted to have the opportunity to talk with you about some of these things. It's really fascinating. I also I'm going to Brazil to go to the rainforest for some ceremonies. And they say, I don't know if you met Marshall at the Spirit of Music Camp, but he has done quite a few of these ceremonies. And I said, what's the connection is there a connection between music and the plant medicine? He said, the music is the plant medicine.
Yeah.
So you know,
Yeah.
maybe we'll have another conversation about that at some point.
Right. Well, I'm going to Peru to enjoy some plant medicine myself. So, see what comes out on the other side of that for both of us.
Yeah, see what the plants have to say. They were here first, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And they speak the same vibrational language that we do. They have the same signal for fear that we have. Like they understand, I'm looking at my plants right here, they understand how I feel because their vibrational language is the same. So, and what is the vibrational language but a music?
Yeah. So, well, this is great, Eileen. Thank you so much for the conversation, and we'll see you the next time. I'll try to get to the Sonic Sunday session if I can, and if we'll just keep at it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks so much for having me, Jefferson.
Thanks. It was great. Namaste, everybody.